Hey everybody, Tom Brockelman here. This is the content introduction for Core 400 AB Digital Stories. And we're just going to go through, the wheres and whys of the course, really why it's here, what we're planning to concentrate on, and what we're hoping you'll learn from the course. So buckle your seatbelts and here we go. And this particular video is going to help you again with course content. Why are we teaching a course about the digital for Core 400? Why now? But also we'll talk a little bit about why the course is taught the way it is. This is perhaps the most interdisciplinary course at Lemoyne, depending on how you define interdisciplinary, and something to know about as you go into it. So really this course was inspired by some version of this graph that you can see all over the internet. I bet you've had it in school in the past. It's about the accelerating growth of technology. It's sometimes called Teller's graph in various versions of it. And if you look at it carefully, you can see that it really is a demonstration of how technological growth has accelerated in the world. If you take some arbitrary point like, say, 1400 and the invention of the printing press, which really was the beginning of a lot of modern social changes in any case. Look, there's a kind of steady, slow growth in technology all the way through about 1900, and then things start to take off, not only after the automobile, the telephone, light bulb, telegraph, to things just go through the roof, but as we get to the later part of the 20th century, the acceleration accelerates, and we get the form here that's often called the hockey stick graph. That's to say, an indication when you graph change against time or against historical lapse, that something is changing with increasing speed. It's accelerating, and thus we get this accelerated growth of technology. Most of it, if you look up here, related to the birth of digital technology and the expansion of digital technology, what we're going to call digital revolutions or the digital revolution in this course, depending on context. So that's the context for this course. The world has been changing. Technology is changing it, and with increasing speed. One element of that we're particularly concerned about in this course is, what we want to call the relationship between technological change and human adaptation. So here we get a kind of version of what we were just looking at, that hockey stick graph, maybe bending at a slightly different rate. And then on the other, the idea of human adaptability. Now, I think originally people thought that human beings adapt to change on something more like what would have been seen as a straight line. We've got some natural limitation having to do with how long we live, how fast we learn things, that young people like you guys tend to learn things faster than old fogies like me. So we would have thought this to be a static variable here, right? That human adaptability would remain pretty much stable. But in fact, over time, societies have learned to change faster. And that's a good thing. And, maybe you could even imagine a slight accelerating curve here. But at the very least, we can say that societies now change faster than they did way back in the 15th century, say in the period of the Renaissance, and that we adapt to change with greater success than we once did. Having said that, what this graph is really all about is showing you still there's a kind of frog in the boiling water problem here, right? Which is technology is changing like this at an increasing clip. Human adaptability is changing a little bit over time. And at some point, we cross this line, right? We get this moment where, as you can see, we are here up above the point where human adaptability is able to comfortably deal with technological change. And that means we get ferment, change, crisis, revolution, all kinds of things going on that indicate that human societies are not able to comfortably deal with a rate of change. So one way to talk about all of this is to maybe use two images to indicate two dominant periods here in this. The first, the period of the Industrial Revolution, which really went from the late 18th century all the way through the mid-early years of the 20th century. Great image for this, if you know the movies, Charlie Chaplin, and that movie Modern Times, where he is a modern factory worker trying to live a modern life. And of course, what modern meant there was industrialized. Down below, I've just got a stock image of a computer lab. Could have been any time in the last 10 years or so. Something that's probably really familiar to you guys. But this is the new technology that we're looking at these days. So what does that mean? Well, if those become our kind of controlling images for how the world is changing, there's a lot that's changing right here. First, the idea of work and leisure. You can talk about an awful lot here. In fact, in that movie, Modern Times, Charlie Chaplin is working in a factory, and that was, of course, the typical work of the industrial period. Huge groups of people were brought from peasant agricultural situations into industrialized labor, whether that was mine work or working literally in factories, or even industrialized farming. But the key to all of those changes is that the work has certain characteristics, right? The characteristics that lead to a whole politics, a certain form of society. People move into cities. We get industrialization as a result of this. We get work as classically put by Karl Marx in the mid-19th century, is alienating, boring. All you're doing is, pressing the same cog over and over again to make a machine work. You're part of the machine. You can see that here we've got Charlie Chaplin's boss talking at him through the machinery. At one point, famously, Charlie Chaplin himself gets caught up in the machinery. And of course, what would be leisure in that would be precisely the opposite. Entertainment, whatever gets you away from the grind of the factory. Not to say that we don't have repetitive work in our world, but it's mostly now mind work, desk work, work that sometimes you can even do far from the people doing it. Or on the other hand, it's service work, right? So classically in our economy, you're either doing this kind of screen work that we see below, or you're working with customers. You're working with live people in service situations that we now, many of which we now call essential work, right? Because we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Human personality types, as you can imagine, the factory shaped a kind of person. Also the opposite of the factory, leisured people like me, people who were lucky enough, tried to escape the factory back then and do things like be a professor. So there was this kind of opposition between the person who was a kind of slave to the factory system, that was literally, say, the slavery system of pre-Civil War Southern plantations in the United States, or it was a more metaphorical slavery, as in slavery to the machine. In all those cases, the thing you were trying to do was to really be autonomous and to be as separate from the machine as possible, to get away from the grind. So personality types were shaped by that. Now we have a whole different set of structures that have arisen in the last half century or so to make do with the new kinds of personality types that the communications and information revolutions have given birth to. Education. Obviously, you need a different kind of education for a factory worker. You need a different kind of education for a professor than you need for somebody who's a computer programmer. You need a different kind of information for somebody who develops apps. You need a different kind of information for the entrepreneur who's working within the communications revolution developed now. So you can see lots of things will change, including right now I'm making this digital video for you, the possibility of a kind of digital labor at every point and the education for that. The relationship between nature and humanity, famous thing at the end, 1989, a year I still remember very well, the fall of the Soviet Union. we had to deal with a kind of environmental disaster produced by the communist regimes upriver, often in Eastern Europe, that had seen nature as the enemy to be overcome by industrialized societies. I'm not talking about politics here so much as I'm talking about, again, this kind of industrialized system and the vision that it gives us of nature, a kind of opposition between the machine and the natural world. The computer revolution is entirely different. That's a most interesting thing about it, right? That that's not to say there aren't problems with pollution that comes out of digital technologies and so on. There certainly is, but the vision of the computer, the vision of the artificial intelligence is very different in its relationship to nature. And the vision of the human being interacting with the computer allows new possibilities for the human being's relationship to nature. Along with that, different economic systems. We need to rethink many economic structures. It's clear that techno-transformations in the last century have led to increasing inequality along with increasing automation. We need to rethink social structure to keep sustainable societies in this kind of system. So that's an important issue raised by the techno-transformations of the last century. Finally, what I call the individual in society. I think right now, at this key moment, COVID-19, we're seeing, I get the feeling, and here's Brockelman making predictions, you can come back and torture me about them in future years, but it seems to me that we are at the cusp of a transformation of how we think about the relationship of the individual and society. And that's been really building up now for quite a while. If you like, the old industrial picture really did favor a kind of vision of the individual who would escape the machine. So this kind of opposition between human beings and society that went along with that. Now it seems to me that we're at the cusp of, well, what communications has made possible, greater interdependence, and a kind of set of ideas about societies and our place in societies, which are much more rooted in the fact that we're all part of a larger web, part of a larger social being. So not just rethinking nature and society here, sorry, nature and culture, nature and technology, but also society and technology. So we are much more social than we ever knew. Communications has emphasized that. I think your generation is the generation that's teaching us how social we can become. And of course, that's going to change how we face all of the challenges, including climate change, that the next years are going to bring. So I wanted to spend a moment here having introduced that set of contrasts with this question: who is the digital person? This is, if you like, rethinking the nature of the individual in relationship to society. And the book that you're going to be using as the course textbook is really all about this. It really is structured around two different questions. What sort of person was necessary to create this new world? And what human qualities does the digital revolution favor? And here are a bunch of people you'll see who are key to the digital revolution and to the book that we're going to be using as our textbook. Grace Hopper, important figure in the history of computer programming. I bet you know that guy. Steve Jobs. I'm hoping over the course of the semester that you can fill in most of the rest of those pictures too. The book is called The Innovators: How a Group of Hackers, Geniuses, and Geeks Created the Digital Revolution. It's by Walter Isaacson. It's already a few years old. It's what happens in our era of accelerating change. Every textbook is immediately overtaken by time, but this one has stood up pretty well. I think it still gives you pictures of the most important innovators, the most important people who brought the digital revolution to us. It's entertaining reading. It's lots of fun. So let's watch a little clip of Walter Isaacson on CBS this morning, interviewing him shortly after this book appeared. I'll give you a sense of what's in the book. And also, you know, we're dealing with stars here.
He is coming off of his best-selling biography of Apple co-founder Steve Jobs. Now, Walter Isaacson is going beyond one modern pioneer. His new book focuses on the men and women who created the computer and the internet. It is called The Innovators, how a group of hackers, geniuses, and geeks created the digital revolution. It is published by Simon & Schuster, a division of CBS. Welcome, Walter. Great to have you here at this table. So, this book got some encouragement and some advice from Bill Gates.
Yeah, I was going to write a book about the history of the internet because, you know, we had been working through the internet at Time Inc. and trying to figure out, you know, how it came to be. And he said, no, the combination of the internet and the personal computer, that was the combustible mix that led to a revolution. So do them both, show how they came together.
Mm-hmm. You said also, too, you were going to write about all these lone inventors, but really, the technological revolution, the internet revolution, is really about collaborative creativity.
You know, one of the things we biographers secretly know is that we distort history a little bit by trying to convey that it's a gal or a guy in a garage or garage who has a light bulb moment and invents something, when in fact most of the innovation of our time is done at tables like this, where people sit around, you have a team. You know, innovation is a collaborative sport these days.
And there are women at the table.
And
history sometimes leaves that out.
And, you know, I tried very hard. My daughter turned me on to the fact that the first concept of a computer comes from Ada Lovelace in the 1830s, working with Charles Babbage. And she comes up with the notion that it could be a general interest computer that can be programmed and do anything like music and art, as well as numbers. And so I went through the book, I looked at how the women were particularly the pioneers in the mathematical programming of the computers. There were 6 women doing ENIAC at Penn secretly because it was during World War II. They don't get their due in history. Lieutenant Grace Hopper, who did it at Harvard, you know. So now these people are getting their due. And it's particularly important because fewer women are doing computer science now than did 15, 20 years ago.
Why is that? I don't know why that is.
I think it's because they, as Jane just kind of alluded to, they don't have role models in history because the history has been, they've kind of been wiped out of history unfairly, I think.
I didn't know who Ada Lovelace was. And in my family, I have 2, my father, my brother, they're computer programmers. I had never heard of Ada Lovelace.
But you know, and even more interesting, take somebody like Jean Jennings Bartik. She has a memoir out that people should get too. But Jean Jennings was a young woman in Atlantis Grove, Missouri, who just wanted to get out of there, studied math at Missouri State Teachers College, saw an ad that said, we need women mathematicians to help us with the war. Took the train to Philadelphia and ended up being the primary programmer of ENIAC, the most important first computer there was. So people like that should be known in history more, and then you'd have more women, I think, in it. Go ahead.
No, I was just putting my glasses on so I could read something at Walter. This just seems so counterintuitive. I've been seeing stuff like this in the last couple of weeks over the weekend. The 3 bottom college majors in terms of getting jobs were math, science, and, communications, media. Overall, U.S. colleges produce twice the number of STEMs, you know, STEM, technology, and engineering and math, graduates annually as find jobs in those fields. Don't get that. Can you?
Well, first of all, I don't know that study, but
this isn't history. This is today.
Right, but I think that the combination of the humanities and technology, that's where the magic is. Steve Jobs said that he loved humanities and arts, calligraphy, he drops out, does dance, but also loves electronics. Whenever he launched a product, he showed that street sign that said the liberal arts, technology. He said if you can stand at that intersection, that's what Ada Lovelace did. Her father was Lord Byron. She was a poet, but she loved mathematics.
Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo is about the ultimate in the combination of art and technology. And I think we sometimes separate people who love the arts and humanities. They have no idea the difference between a transistor and a resistor. They get scared when they talk about circuit design. People who are engineers sometimes don't have a feel for poetry. those who can do both, I think that's where they'll be the next Steve Jobs.
Walter Isaacson has struck again.
Hey, thank you.
Steve
Far too
Jobs,
kind,
my
far too
favorite
kind.
book, The Wise Men.
Einstein.
Yes.
Wow, you can remember the way you're not old
Yeah.
enough.
Frank
No,
Lloyd.
yeah. All right. The Innovators is on sale now.
So finally, let me just spend a couple minutes answering what must seem to be a pretty obvious question. Why is this digital stories course interdisciplinary? Why did we choose to structure it the way we did? Because if you look at the syllabus, you'll see, 90%, maybe 80% of the course material is not delivered by myself or Professor Giordano, but by one or another guest, experts from around Lemoyne College, or in one case, from the business community outside of Lemoyne. So I just wanted to alert you to that. Father Vinny Heveron's going to be coming in, as is Kathy Grace Syracusa, Ted Shepard of the economics department, and of course Dave Voorhees of computer science, and Jeff Chin of the sociology department. They're all going to be talking about the ways that what they look at in their various disciplines has changed because of the digital revolution, or in some cases, the way that their disciplines themselves have either evolved or taken off because of the digital revolution. So knowledge itself has changed, as well as, of course, what we know. The communications and informations revolutions that hand in hand create the digital revolution have changed everything about the university and college, as well as, of course, what professors at universities and colleges study. And I certainly shouldn't forget to mention, really a major event for this semester, as it is every semester, we have what's called our McDevitt Core Lecture. This entire course is funded by the McDevitt Center under the rubric of the McDevitt Core Professorship. And part of that is that they fund a public lecture every fall. Now, of course, in the age of COVID, we're not going to be able to do the normal public lecture. We're going to have a Zoom lecture from Cincinnati, Ohio, but it is, in fact, an important person in business, Suzanne Kopcha. She's also a Lemoyne alum, and she's the Vice President for Consumer Products and Retail Strategy at Siemens PLM Software in Cincinnati. And she's done lots of really interesting work on the transformative nature of the digital world when it comes to the design and advertising of new products. So digital engineering, if you like. And she'll be giving a talk on the area where she's been doing her most recent work, the transformative power of digital in food and beverage development. And we hope you'll all welcome Suzanne Kopcha for our McDevitt Core Lecture. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not mention something special about this course. With all its bells and whistles, you can tell this is no ordinary course. In fact, it would not be able to happen at all but for the generous funding of a couple of different organizations. First, that this is, as I mentioned earlier, the McDevitt Core course. And that means that we receive resources to support capstone work in the senior core from the McDevitt Center, as well as to bring in guest speakers, the Lemoyne guest speakers you see all semester, as well as Suzanne Kopcha, our McDevitt Core guest lecturer. So we receive resources from the McDevitt Center for all those things. But we also benefit from an NEH grant for development of a new minor in ethics in the philosophy department. And that helps us as well in funding the mentoring work that will be so essential to this course, as you'll see in another video. So this is the McDevitt Core course, Digital Stories, for the fall of 2020. And just to remind you, here we are. I almost never take my glasses off, but there you have me in a moment with contacts on the left, and then Professor Giordano on the right. We'll be the official course faculty. We're like the ringleaders of the circus. And of course, we're the people you bring questions to. about anything in the course. So welcome aboard. We're happy to have you here. And I think it's an exciting semester. So we look forward to getting to know you all here in Digital Stories.